Hi, Julie Barclay here to lead you through the rehearse part of the course. I'm going to be sending you 3 videos. The first one about the context of your monologue, the second one about actioning, and the third one running you through a few rehearsal methods that are hopefully fun and get you freed up and connected to the piece. A little bit about me. I'm an actress and I've been working in drama training and education for 25 years. I've done quite a bit of theatre as an actor, television and some film. I have a website at allthews.juliebarclay.com if you wanted to find out more about my teaching. But mostly I work with students on monologues, classical, contemporary monologues, and some professionals too, looking at work for their auditions. So let's move straight on with the first video about the context. Hi, so we're going to be talking about context. The writer will have decided a detailed context and become familiar with the character and the environment and the story, and you need to bring yourself up to speed with their thinking and work out the authorial intention, which is just a posh way of saying work out what the writer wants. They've done a lot of thinking and preparation. Well, you know, because you've written a monologue. So the actor has a lot of planning to do before they can start speaking the text. So the first step is to ask yourself some questions and be as inquisitive as possible and mine the text for all the clues and fill in some blanks if you need to in order to fill out the reality of the situation. So whichever group I'm working with, if it's a youth theatre or professional actors, it seems obvious, but I couldn't start working with you unless we'd got all the W's sorted out. This will seem quite obvious to a lot of you, and maybe you've thought about this already. But who, what, when, where, why is the meat and 2 veg. It's like the scaffold around a new building. I'd probably liken actioning to the bricks and mortar, and then the rehearsal methods to the white goods and the soft furnishings, and but I might be taking that metaphor a little bit too far. But getting back to the context, it's really important that you work out who, what, when, where, why. Who, obviously, it's you, and you have been cast specifically to bring your interpretation to the text. Forget any ideas about the character being outside of yourself. The trick is to find your responses in as detailed a way and be guided by the clues in the text and the energy in the story and the events. But it's your response. The character should make a journey from the page to your consciousness. So begin to select what aspects of your nature are appropriate for this role and what you need to leave on the back burner. You don't have to play the whole character, just the character in this moment. If you can imagine, if you played all of yourself all the time, if you played all of yourself when you were just ordering a pizza, that would be ridiculous. So don't worry about playing the whole character. Just think about the responses and feelings in this moment, and it should help you edit in and out what you do and don't need to explore. Also, under who is there with you, consider peopling the text. So who is mentioned in the script? It could be that you're there alone and you're speaking directly to camera, but knowing who's there with you and what your relationship is to them is really important. If the character that you're playing is much younger or older than you, then don't act younger or older, I would say. Instead, just a subtle response to the age suggested is the way forward. The most important thing is that you are able to reveal your response to the text, but not be disguised by it. Okay, so the character is you. You can make some subtle changes perhaps to the way you look in terms of costume and your physicality. We'll get to that later. But it should feel wholly connected to the unit of you, because You can't be anything other than yourself, especially on camera and especially if you're speaking directly to the lens. But I'm sure Luca will touch on that in another video. Moving on to what is happening, what has happened. Is it a memory from the past, or is the action unfolding as the character speaks in real time? This will affect everything about the rhythms of the speech and the physicality you adopt. It'll affect the spontaneity you use, the pace and energy you use. As the story, the events unfold, you should get a sense of the structure of the monologue and make some decisions about the journey of the thoughts, sometimes known as beats, and be able to identify the arc of the text and the transitions between the exposition, the development and conclusion. So you've really got your arms around the whole speech and you've got a feeling for the shape of it. Ask yourself, what does the character want to achieve by speaking the way they do? Is it a confrontation? Is it an accusation? Is it a release of feelings? Is it a secret? Is it a memory? Each scenario demands that you make choices about your character. Moving on to when, it's probable that the monologue will be set now. If you've been given something from another century, give some thoughts to your posture and gesture to help you recreate the energy from another time frame. Think about the time of day, the season. Imagine what happens just before the speech begins. This character wants to speak their thoughts now, so the when question should be thought through. What has provoked the character to speak now? You might not have the answer in the text, but creating the reality for yourself will help launch you into the monologue. Is it... what time of day is it set? The season, the decade, those kind of questions. Where, is it internal or external? How does this affect how you are free to speak? Is it your home? Are you comfortable or not? Is your body language affected by the location? Say, for example, you were talking at a police station, you might behave differently towards the police than if you said the same thing to them in your house, for example. So think about whether or not you are familiar with the location, whether you're comfortable there. Remember, the geographical setting is important to the writer, but use your own voice unless you are confident about the accent, so that the monologue truly belongs to you and not an idea of you. I don't want the accent to get in the way of it being, the interpretation being wholly yours. So why is very important, isn't it? Why are you there? Why are you saying these words now? Why have you been provoked to say them? Why do you need to say them now? The writer will have an idea of how their work could be performed because they're actors, and will have suggested as much as they can through hinting at the energy and qualities of the character. The journey of the speech should be clear to identify and help you perform. But the useful thing to remember is that you're performing it, not them. And this is new writing, so you are the character, and you can be exceptionally playful in your process, and they will be fascinated by your choices. Creating a character in this way is a symbiotic experience. Both the writer and the actor bring something unique to the page. So before you think about your relationship with the other person, before you think about feelings, before you think about emotions, or even actioning, consider the context. Thanks very much, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi, so moving on to video 2, all about actioning, which is one of my favourite ways to work. I'm just going to quote from dear departed Terry Johnson, who was a big advocate of actioning, who says, "I have worked with actors whose foreheads hit the table at the very mention of an action. I've worked with actors who energetically resist the idea that rational thought might be part of their creative process. But I have helped transform some young actors by converting them to a belief in actioning. More instructively, I have worked with many actors for whom actions are a second language, not a foreign language or an exotic one, but a technical articulation of the elusively human. A good actor talks about actions like a builder-decorator talks about the nature of nails or the colour of paint. Actions can lead an actor from confusion to clarity, from muddle to magnificence, from the cliched to the complex. And I actually wasn't introduced to actioning at drama school and discovered it when working at Hull Truck Theatre back in the 80s. Makes me sound really old. But what I wanted to say is that actioning is the process of identifying what the character wants from the person they're talking to. So you may have been introduced to actioning before, but here's a quick recap. It's an essential, for me, it's an essential part of the process of rehearsing because it helps you consciously identify where the need to speak comes from. Actioning requires that you think of a transitive verb, and that's a verb that you can play. So, for example, sad is a verb, but it's not a verb you can play. You can't sad somebody. So that's why at the top there I've put I, which is your character, and then ... and then you, and that's the person you're speaking to, or if you're speaking down the camera, that's the person watching you. You have to find a verb that you can actively play. It's a brilliant way of exploring the thoughts, and the method is pretty straightforward, and I'm sure it will help you. So actioning is a method to conclusively decide how the text should be communicated based on the writer's intention and your interpretation. So I'm just going to give you a few examples of actioning words. And then at the end, I'm going to give you a website where you can go and print off a list of actioning words. Some of you may have an actor's thesaurus already that I use like my Bible in my teaching. I'm just going to refer to it. Now. So your monologues are going to be very diverse and very different. But if you don't know as a character why you need to say where the thought comes from, the writer knows, but it's your job, like a detective, to find out and decide why. Why are you speaking to that person? We covered that in context, but actioning is about what you want them to feel, what you want to do to them. So as an example, you might think of the phrase, I overlook you, I disregard you, I ignore you, I snub you. Or maybe it's more confrontational. I oust you, I banish you, I dispose you, I expel you, I sack you. Each one of these words gives you a flavour or a shading of colour that you can actually play with the text. So rather than thinking about, oh, how is this character feeling and how do I act the feeling, more important is for you to know what it is you want to say and why you want to say it and what effect you want to have in saying it. I'm going off course here a little bit, but if I was an actress playing a teacher now and I didn't know that I was educating you, or guiding you, advising you, I'd say this text that I'm saying now, these words, in a very different way. But because I know I'm guiding you, because I know what the job description is, the brief is, my performance, if you like, my character speaks in a certain way, and that's what I'm advising you to do. I do advise at some point that you get Actions, the actor's thesaurus. I've just read the foreword there from Terry Johnson. It's by Nick Hearn Books. Other actions, I mean, there are hundreds of them. To encourage, to enfold, to endorse. Some of the actions could be physical ones. I poke you, I provoke you, I slap you, I shove you. Not actually, because it's likely that you'll be doing your monologue on your own, but you embody that word, that verb, that transitive verb with the way that you play the text. So I won't keep saying random actioning words. But as I said, I will give you a list at the end. So, so you may find yourself speaking directly to the camera. So the other person in the scene is the viewer, and that person is who you're speaking to. The method's still very useful, despite the fact that they aren't actually in the room with you. If you're speaking to someone off camera, then you can play the verb as if the person is in the room. Again, actioning will be very helpful to help you focus your thoughts, especially if there's no one there. It may be helpful to place someone there if you can, but I'm sure Luca will advise you about the technical aspects of filming in another video. So take each thought, split the monologue up into thoughts, because some people talk about actioning every line, but people don't speak in lines. People don't speak in sentences, clear sentences like in literature. You know, they speak in thoughts, and those thoughts are complex and sometimes interrupted, and sometimes a thought begins, it goes off track, goes on to another track, and then it comes back. Shakespeare was brilliant at doing this, sometimes better than some contemporary writers. There we are, controversial. Take each thought and allocate the thought with a verb that you can play. Try to play with a number of different verbs so that you can capture the exact tone you're looking for. And this is the fun bit. You know, when you're on your own now, practicing with the camera, you're not in a rehearsal room full of actors and you don't feel under pressure to get it right. All right, don't pressurize yourselves. I've been in lots of rehearsal rooms where it's like, oh, I'm rehearsing now and I've got to get this scene right. I've got to pin it down. I need to know what the blocking is. I need to know what I'm doing. I hope the first thing I do is good. Don't worry about being a good actor. Don't worry about whether or not you're good enough. You know, the point is that in the luxury of this course, you can rehearse on your own and you can play. And I'll come back to that in rehearsal methods a bit later. But try lots of different verbs. You're not taking up anyone's time, and it'll really help you to find the heart and soul of the character that you've been given to play. So, I've just written some notes here about sometimes you see people acting with a feeling. That's my point number 5 there. Avoid acting feelings. You can't act emotions. Sometimes you see people acting angrily and you have an opinion that they really don't know where that comes from, and they're just plastering the feeling on top, and that's because they haven't done their homework. They've not explored where the feeling comes from. They haven't looked at the genesis of the need to speak that thought. So if you followed the ideas of context and now you're looking at actioning, this is like the scaffold followed by the bricks and mortar. Okay, actioning is the bricks and mortar. If you didn't have it, the house won't stand up. Okay, much better to discover where the thoughts come from and allow the feelings to accompany the thought and possibly make an appearance, but it's not something you can rehearse as a given. You can't rehearse in a crying. It should overwhelm you. It should accompany the thought. And if it's not there, it's not there. That doesn't mean to say it's not valid or convincing or truthful. So always use the structure there, I, and then you use the verb, and then with you. That's how you work it to yourself. Change the verb when the thought changes. So there are hundreds of verbs you can use, as I said. I'm going to give you the web address now for the list you can print off. Hold on. Find it. I think Jamie's going to put this on the video. It's texasartsproject.com/WP-content /uploads/2012/03/tacticlist21.pdf. So that's nice and straightforward, isn't it? Jamie will write it on the video, and then you can get cracking with a list of actioning verbs and enjoy and have fun. The most important thing is that you don't feel you have to pin this character down straight away. An actor's gift is that they love to play. So enjoy playing with a selection of transitive verbs. And I'll see you in the next video, which is all about different ways of rehearsing. Hi, so this is the third video on rehearsal methods. Forget about actioning for a while, just put it on pause, and we'll come back to it later, obviously. But this is where I've got 13, unlucky for some, but 13 ideas how you can lift, sorry, just wobbled the camera there, just lift the character onto its feet, starting with looking at the text, identifying the shape of the monologue, find the transitions so that you know where the exposition becomes the development and where the conclusion begins. It might not be clear, but it's helpful to think about it. What is the most important thing the character says? It's important to find the arc of the monologue and move towards that moment in the playing, and then think about where to go with your expression after that. So the shape of the monologue, the structure, the flow, and the arc. Text can be quite limiting in a way, and obviously very useful, but as an actor, going back to this thought of not speaking in proper sentences and lines, if you take out all the punctuation to free up the spontaneity of thought, it gives you the freedom to think the thoughts as they occur to you, because, you know, we don't speak in paragraphs. We respond to events and express our thoughts. You can go back to the punctuation later, especially if it's important or helpful, but by removing it to start with, you can take ownership of the monologue as if you were actually speaking it. Hot seating, I know lots of you will have done hot seating before in a group and people will have asked you questions. Well, if you're on your own, then you can hot seat yourself as if you're at an interview. So start with any way you like, really. But it's just to help you fill out some areas of the character that aren't on the page that might help you feel more settled into the role. You might want to start with a biography, name, age, occupation, place of birth, and see where that takes you. There's no rules. You know, it's your freedom to explore the character out loud as if you were being interviewed. Say, Graham Norton were interviewing you. You know, how would you talk about yourself? Rehearse as if. Now, this is a Stanislavski method. I'm sure lots of you are familiar with it and do it as a matter of course. I left a bit of a gap there on the paper because I was going to list some, and then I thought, oh, there's too many, so many as ifs. But some of my suggestions are: do it as if you find the whole thing really funny. This is useful because you can hold on to anything that works if you want to, but I want to push you away from the idea that as doing this monologue now on camera for this course, I want you to try and shift away from the idea of being a good performance or being a good actor. You need to free yourself up. Sometimes I do my monologues for auditions as if I'm completely drunk. Sometimes, oh no, I won't say that. I was going to say sometimes I am completely drunk, but that would be a lie, of course. But if you play it physically and vocally free, this can help relax you and take away the responsibility to do good acting, whatever that is. Do it as if you don't know what you're going to say. It helps with the spontaneity. Having learned a monologue, I know as an actor, it's great to show it done perfectly, but the character, remember, hasn't learned anything. So allow thinking and being into the world of the speech. Speaking is only the end result of thought and responses. So don't feel that speaking it is the only thing that you need to think about. Speaking it and how you speak it is one aspect of many, many aspects. That's why I've talked about context, about thoughts, and about what the thoughts are aiming to achieve within the scene. Saying a speech double quick is good. It will highlight where passages could go more pacier. Playing around with the rhythm of the speech is another as if. Another popular as if, it's as if you have to keep the person that you're speaking to listening to you or in the room. It brings an urgency that may be useful, might not be, but it might be that sense of purposefulness. Is that a word even? Purposefulness? That might be useful to you. Okay. Where have we got to? Playing the opposite. I love playing the opposite. I love playing the opposite because that's what we do in real life. So if you've got a particular thought in your speech which is very dramatic, just try playing it the other way around. Throw it away, laugh on it, give it no importance whatsoever. How many times have you noticed people talking about catastrophic things that have happened to them, and they just say them so lightly because the psychology, I think, behind it is that they don't want to upset the person they're speaking to. But then the smallest little thing can drive them absolutely insane. Like, I got a parking ticket, or I've got no tea bags now. But then they say, yeah, my mum had cancer last year and it was really sad. And you think, look at the different ways that people speak. Take this to your speech and just see if you can change things around, lighten something that's dramatic, and find something seemingly throwaway. Try and play that with some importance. Again, it might not be useful, but I always love to practice that. Often you'll find that playing the opposite is a more interesting choice. This is a really fun one to explore, I think. Playing music too, number 6 there, playing music to create an ambient space. What do I mean by that? Well, when you're in an empty space, it can be a pretty imposing atmosphere. If you play music, it creates an ambient space for you to connect with the environment that you're in. Try playing music that seems to go with the speech. If it's a dramatic speech, you might want to play some Wagner or some kind of classical music, perhaps. If it's a comedy speech, you might want to put on some circus, or something from a sitcom. But I think an interesting one is to play a contrast. So put something on that encourages you to think about the speech differently. Push yourself out of your comfort zone. I'm always encouraging you not to do what's the most obvious thing and then decide on it too soon. And that leads on to number 7, change the genre. So if it does appear to be a comedy speech, then play it straight down the line dramatic. If it appears to be a very serious, confrontational, or serious confessional, then try and bring an element of farce or melodrama even, or comedy to it, and see what you can find. Okay, I'm just going to turn over the flip chart. Okay, coming back to my love of verbs. If you just highlight the verbs in the speech and just say them, you'll probably find that the verbs do a lot of the speaking. It's the action words, it's the things that the person does or has done. So I often work with classical speeches just like this. You just say the verbs out loud, and often it tracks a path through the speech which shows you how to anchor the speech. How many verbs are there up to the arc? And then how many verbs are there that resolve the speech? If you just say the verbs out loud, I'm sure you'll find a nice new insight into the piece. So the doing words are always gold in a monologue. Highlighting the verbs, you can track the path through the action of the monologue. It'll feel strange, but it will also illuminate the journey for you. Circles of attention. Circles of attention is, again, it's a Stanislavski method. It's about energy circles of attention. It's about how far the energy travels. You may be speaking to someone, but you may find yourself suddenly speaking to yourself, or responding or aiming one of the thoughts in the speech to yourself. So if that little thought is buzzing around your head and you take your eyes off the camera for a bit, or you take your eyes away from the person you're speaking to off camera, that might be called circle 1. Just those thoughts. You say something and then you might go off on a tangent and just speak to yourself and then come back to the camera. So that would be in circle 1. Circle 2 would be an energy that reaches that person you're speaking to. Circle 2 is the circle that we mostly operate in. If you're in a supermarket and you're speaking to the person on the till, there's you, that person, that's circle 2. If you were to be shouting at someone across the other side of the supermarket, that would be circle 3. Or if you're speaking up to the heavens or down to the depths of hell, as they do in Shakespeare so often, that would be circle 3 too. Well, not circle 3 too, I mean circle 3 as well. So if you mix up the circles, you'll find that your monologue is much more interesting to watch. If you lock off on one point, it doesn't have the ring of truth about it. We very rarely look at someone the whole time we're speaking to them. Think about the times in your family, in your home, with the people that you live with or work with. Many times we speak to people and we don't look at them at all. It all depends on the relationship between you and the person in your speech. So, experimenting with mixing up the range of the energies you use. Do you want the other person to hear everything you say? Some thoughts are only for you. Maybe the character comments to themselves about the irony of the situation. Look at the text, see if you can vary the circles. Okay, the next one, gesture and body language. Obviously a really important one. Use gestures while you just think the monologue in your mind. Again, this is going to feel strange because you'll be thinking the words in silence, and just let your hands and your body do the talking. Observe what your hands want to do naturally and your body wants to do. Are there any physical habits that the character has to indicate their mood or their state of mind? How does gesture reflect the status of the character that you're playing? So think the text through. Obviously you can say it out loud too, but I just want to give a little bit of space in number 11, gesture and body language, for your body and your gestures to be the most visible thing in this exercise. Okay, so experiment with positioning. Use a chair, sit on the floor. You may film your monologue outside. Try ranges of ways of positioning, or find the best and safe, obviously, environment to film it in. Going on to speech pauses and silences. Experiment with small beats. I love Harold Pinter, by the way. I've directed a couple of Harold Pinter plays, and he has such an accurate understanding of the way that people take a beat, they pause, they reflect, and silences are so powerful. The anticipation of what is going to be said next after a silence is where the drama is. So go through and play around with small beats, slightly longer pauses, and then big, old, wonderful silences. Observe whether or not they hold up the flow or add something to the unfolding of the story. Stretch out a pause as long as you can, just to play with the effect of that, the possibilities of that. There's something so fascinating in a monologue about seeing a character just thinking and deciding in the moment what to say. Okay, this kind of leads me on to spontaneity and truth, really. It's spontaneity. Life is a big improvisation, isn't it? None of us have been given anything to say. So the appearance that you don't know what you're going to say is utmost important. It's a reflection of life. We recognize it as being truthful. And the last thing you want to aim for is a learned speech performed for camera. I know that's what sounds obvious, doesn't it? I know that's what you're doing. But when you've experimented with some of the different rehearsal techniques, return to your ideas of actioning and let your performance be enhanced by the findings of playing with the text. You don't have to do all these 13 things. Just do the things that you think you'd like to do for fun. This process should be great fun, and it should illuminate the monologue for you so that you start by looking at it and saying, how am I going to bring myself to this? I don't know whether I can connect to this. Well, through using the context, actioning, and rehearsal methods, it should bring you some way to finding something fun and maybe even exciting for you. And I really look forward to seeing your work further down the line. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the course.